Welcome to 11 chords. In this section, we're going to be talking about 11 chords, the structure and how you can use them and everything. So the first thing we're going to look at is a C major 11 chord. We're going to start with the basics, and we use C because it's an easier key to look at because it's all white keys, and it's the easiest way to do it. So let's look at the C major 11. Now this is not a typical chord that you will hear in a lot of music because there's a lot of tension. And really the F and the E, because they're right next to each other, they create tension. You know, even though they're not next to each other technically right here, but they are technically, you know, E and F are right by each other. So it just doesn't really work, but I'm gonna teach you anyway. So we got the 1, 3, and 5. That's the first thing you start with when you're creating an 11 chord. It doesn't matter if you're in a major key, a minor key, 11 chord. You always got to start with the root. So we got the root. Then the next thing you would do is extend it by adding the 7th. Then you would add the 9th. Then you would add the 11th. All right? So that's pretty much how you make an 11 chord. I don't ever use this chord because there's a lot of tension and it just doesn't work. And if you look into a lot of music, you will hardly ever see a major 11 chord, you know, because of the dissonance and the sound that it creates. So that's basically how you do it with any chord. You got to have the root, and the further along you extend it, you got to have the 7th, the 9th, and, you know, add that 11th in there too as well. So this is a major 11 chord. This is a C major 11 chord. Now, let's look at the C minor 11 chord. Now, that's a chord that I really like to use when going into different passing chords because it just sounds real nice. So the first thing we would do with this is start with the basics, the root of C minor, which will be C, E flat, and G, okay? So I'll play it up here. We have C, E flat, and G. Then the next thing we would want to do is add the 7th, just like the major, okay? So we would add the B flat, and this is the 7th of the C minor scale, all right? Then you would add the 9th of the C minor scale. We're extending the chord, and then you would add the 11th, which will be F. So you can think like this, in technical terms, the 11th is always going to be the 4th, because we don't call the 4th the 4 when inside of a chord. So when you're naming chords and you're adding the 4th, that's called the 11th most of the time. So remember this, the 2 is always going to be called the 9, the 4 is always going to be called the 11th, and the 6 is always going to be called the 13. So we have the 1, like in just in naming chords, this is something for future reference. We have the 1, 3, and 5. And then pretty much almost everything else, like the 2, that's going to be called the 9. The 4 is always going to be called the 11th, and the 6 is always going to be called the 13th. The 7 is just the 7th, okay? So anything outside of that, that's how it really works. So for the C minor 9, this is the C minor 9. Like I said, we got the 1, the 3, and the 5, which is the root, and then we add the 7th. Then we add the 9th, then we add the 11th, which is this, okay? So there's a lot of different things that you can do when creating voicings for this chord, and I'm gonna share a couple with you. If you've seen Gospel Keys Urban Pro 600, you know these are some of my favorite chords. I have a lot of different techniques to use when creating voicings. If you haven't checked that out, visit gospelkeysurban.com, and there's a lot of tips and tricks just on the website alone that, you know, will just change your whole thought process as far as chords and voicings are concerned. So let's look at one of the techniques that I use. And to start, this is our C minor 11, right? The first thing I said was take the root out of the chord, which is C. So you're gonna take that, and that goes in the bass. 9 times out of 10, if you're playing a C minor 11, C is gonna be in your bass. So you don't have to have it in the chord too as well. So that's the first thing we do. So that's in the bass. Keep that in mind, even though you don't see it in the chord right now. So we use the polychord technique, and you can see two chords. You can see an E flat major chord right here, E flat, G, and B flat, and then right here, you see a B flat major chord. Now the first thing I would do is say, okay, these are my two chords that I can mix together to make one big chord and create various different voicings. So right off the top, the first thing that you can do to the E flat chord, remember we have two, we have E flat and B flat. You can add the seventh, the major seventh, to that E flat chord, and that gives you that D. So in your left hand, this is what you can play most of the time. It doesn't matter what inversion, you can play it like this, you can play it like this. But this is how your left hand is going to be rooted to create different voicings. So what you're going to be doing is mixing and matching this chord in your left hand. It can be in this inversion. We can move it up and play this inversion. You can mix it up and play this inversion. But for your left hand, this is what's going to be played. Now, as far as your right hand is concerned, we have the B flat major chord. You can play it in root position. You can play it in first inversion. You can play it in second inversion. But the idea is that you have different inversions for your right hand. You have different inversions of this chord in your left hand. All you do is mix and match and combine. You can play it like this, okay? That gives you a different voice. And you can play it like this. And just by keeping the left hand right here, that creates a different voicing. You can actually move this voicing in your left hand to this inversion. You can actually move the G up here, and you can move the E flat up here and play it in this inversion. You can play a B flat chord right here. Okay? So just doing this just gives you all different types of voicings. And when I'm off the 11th, the minor 11th, that's really what I use. I use the left hand, some type of major 7 in my left hand, using the same concept. And then in my right hand, most of the time, it's going to be some type of major triad chord or minor triad chord when mixing and matching different voices. It will be major with this minor 11th, but when you get into 13s and everything, sometimes the triad chord will be minor. But for the most part, when doing a lot of these two-hand chord voicings, just know that the right hand is going to be some type of triad chord most of the time, you know, depending on the type of voicing that you're using. But that concept alone will create a lot of different voicings for you, just mixing and matching that major 7 in your left hand and the major triad chords in your right. So that's it pretty much for the minor 11th chord. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take you to the key of F, and we're going to use that same application so you can actually see how to do it in different keys as well. So let's look at it. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to start with the root chord. So if we're looking at the F minor 11, what's the 1, 3, and 5 of the F minor scale? I'll give you some time to think about it. All right? It would be F, A flat, and C. This is the root. This is the F minor chord. Now what you would do, you would add the 7th, you would add the 9, and then you would add the 11th. Okay? Now this is our F minor 11. So the first thing we do is take that F and put it in the bass. So now we're left with this. And if we actually look at it, we have two different chords. We have the A flat major chord, and we have the E flat major chord. Okay? So an easier way to actually figure out what the two chords will be is after you take that bass out, you take the root out and put it in the bass. What you would do is say, okay, what's my first note? That's what type of major chord you would play. So the first note that's in the chord after you remove the root, that would be an A flat. All right, so that's the A flat major chord. That's where it comes from. And then after that, you will find what's the third note that's left. So this is the first, this is the second, this is the third. So whatever the third notes that's left in the chord, that's the other major chord that would be in the chord, okay? So we got the A flat, and then we got the E flat. So this is the A flat chord and the E flat major chord mixed together. That's creating this F minor 11. All right. So what I said was, in the left hand, what we would do is add the seventh, the major seventh of that A flat, and then in the right hand, just play the E flat major triad. So what we do, we just mix and match these chords. The different versions of the E flat major chord in the right hand and the different versions of the A flat major 7 in the left hand. So that's how it works. So even if whatever key you're in, if you were going to the F minor, that's how it would sound with this version. If I do a passing chord and take it to this, this is still an E flat major chord in my right hand and an A flat major 7 in my left hand. Let's look at one more. Same concept. It looks different because I have two G's, but this is still an E flat major chord on my right. G, B flat, E flat, and G. Just giving you a fuller sound. So that's how you can take this chord to any key using this concept, finding the left hand, finding the right hand, the polychord technique, mixing them together, and that's how you get your minor 11. That's it for this section. See you in the next one.